What if you're from a small town? There's a lot of them. A lot of people, they go to school and they maybe just try to find a job in their town. Maybe you'll start your own business if the town can support it. But what about if you're from a small town in Alabama? Now all of a sudden you've got your own Netflix comedy special? How the hell does that happen? Dusty Slay is from a small town in Alabama and has that comedy special on Netflix. So he's going to tell us how that happened. What did he used to do before comedy? And his big break, how did he get discovered? All the way down in Alabama. Comedian Dusty Slay.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Hey, Dusty.
Hey, what's happening?
How you doing?
We're having a good time.
You, congratulations. Netflix special just dropped. Have you noticed any difference in your fame?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm very famous now, and I can't even leave the house anymore. No, I've picked up a few followers here and there, and I've gotten some nice messages from my friends, and it feels good.
So tell me a little bit about growing up in Opelika, Alabama, and I bet you liked how I pronounced that. I pronounced it correctly because I like Opelika, and I've been there, and I would love to retire one day on Lake Martin. So I'm familiar with the area.
Yeah, well, you did a great job pronouncing it.
I appreciate it.
I love Opelika. When I left when I was 21. I mainly left because I just wanted to see something else. I wanted to have new experiences. I didn't leave out of some dislike for Opelika. I mean, you could argue that I was, in some ways, an angry post-teenager that was just like, I got to get out of here.
Right.
But in the real sense, I always loved visiting. I still do. I just went back with my family, and I rented a nice Airbnb on the north side of town, and it felt good. I felt fancy. I felt like, ooh, I'm in the nice part of Opelika.
And what a lot of people might not realize if they're not familiar with Alabama is that, there is some civilization in Alabama, and I would say Opelika is, one part of civilization, kind of close to the college, and there's, like a lot going on. There's also a lot of desolate roads with nothing going on and, hitchhikers and whatnot. But there definitely is a lot going on in Opelika. What did your parents do for jobs there?
They all think we're toothless hillbillies down in Alabama. And the thing that I've learned after I've driven almost over the entire country is that this country is so much alike. There are so many states that's just like Alabama.
You're right.
You got your big cities, you got your small towns, you got your empty roads. Growing up, my parents are divorced. My mom worked at a plant in Opelika that made VHS tapes.
Oh, wow.
It was called Ampex, and then later called Quantigy, and they made the tape that went inside VHS tapes. They all thought that they would retire from that company. They thought that would last forever.
Yeah, well, maybe forced an early retirement for Mom, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were the last family to get into DVDs. We're not getting into the competition here. And then my dad sold insurance, but my dad lives on a farm, so he sold insurance for a few hours a day, and then he would come home and plow a field and make me pick up all the rocks.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Stuff like that.
Being the son of a farmer, I'm sure, is not the most fun job out there. What about school, Dusty? Were you like the class clown, when you were in school? Did you get good grades?
Yeah, I would say so. A little bit of both. I mean, I always enjoyed attention, so I loved making people laugh. And I felt like I was very good at it. I felt like oftentimes I made the teacher laugh. I didn't necessarily just annoy the teacher. I think I had a way to make everybody laugh. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't annoy a teacher or two along the way.
Right.
And I did get pretty good grades. I wasn't an A student, but I didn't fail. I never failed a class. And I only got one D my whole time, and that was in Spanish class. I really struggled learning another language. Other than that, I was an A, B, C student.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I can see struggling in Spanish, especially, when you're from Alabama, you've got an accent and they expect you to roll that damn R. I'd be like, wow, that you're asking a lot of me, senorita.
Yeah, and then my Spanish teacher was pregnant, and halfway through the year, she left, and we got a substitute. This is what happened to me. We got a substitute, and the substitute seemed to not care what we did.
Okay.
So there was 2 girls in my class, and they were very smart, and they let me copy their paper every day.
Right.
So every day, I just copied directly off their paper. And then on finals day, my teacher, this substitute, this evil woman, would not let me sit next to those girls.
Oh, no.
And the Spanish test, the whole thing was in Spanish. I had no idea. It was multiple choice. I just went through and filled in some bubbles. It took me about 10 seconds to do the test, and I was out of there.
Oh, man.
I failed that exam so bad that it gave me a D. I almost failed the class.
Wow.
Fortunately, I did not fail.
How come she moved you? Do you know why? Was she on to you?
I know that she knew I was copying the paper, but She allowed it. She let me do it the whole year. She wasn't like, hey, I'm not going to let you do that on exam day. Right. And I guess she was trying to teach me some kind of lesson. People always think they're teaching a lesson. What she should have been doing was teaching the whole year,
right,
and not waiting to the end to try to teach that.
Right. So after you're done with, high school, was college in your future at all? Where were you when you're graduating high school mentally?
Mentally, I had no idea what was going on. I mean, I don't want to talk bad about my parents, but they were not preparing me for the future. Okay. They weren't getting ready. They weren't like, all right, you got to take your ACTs, you got to take your SATs, you got to get ready. They weren't doing any of that. So I didn't do any of those things. And then my dad actually told me, he goes, all right, if you pay, I was going to go to Southern Union Community College.
Okay, yeah.
And he said, if you'll pay for half, I'll pay the other half. So I went out and I got a grant. I got a Pell Grant that paid for half of my college.
There you go.
And instead of telling my dad that I got the money,
right, I
told him I got a Pell Grant.
Right.
And he said, okay. Now that meant there was only $500 left to pay. It was about $1,000 a semester or whatever. And he goes, all right, well, you come up. Now, because it wasn't my money, we still were going to split it 50-50. So there's $500 left. So he was like, so my dad was willing to put forth $250 for my college. So I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to do it.
Oh, so really? So the $250 that got in the way of you going to Southern Union Community College?
Yeah, I was never that into the idea of doing it anyway. And I felt like I had really accomplished something by getting that Pell Grant. And my dad, I feel like really just, took the wind out of my sails.
Right.
I just, when you don't feel like, and this, and I'm not even just trying to criticize my parents. I got my own kids now, so I'm trying to learn these lessons. But it's like, it just feels like when you're not building your kids up, then what? I got to motivate myself.
Right.
I was like, no, I'll go out and get a job and I'll make some money. I'd rather do that than sit around in Southern Union down here.
Sure. So Dusty, where did comedy come into play? Did you all of a sudden say, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian? Or did you just try an open mic night one night and it worked out? How did you become who you are today?
Well, when I was 21, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina. And I moved there with one friend, but I really had no other friends. I was working at Office Depot, and everybody was much older than me, and nobody wanted to hang out. So I saw in the paper that they were doing adult improv class.
Okay.
And I didn't really know what improv was, but I knew it was comedy. So I went and I took those classes, and then I met people, and through that, I ended up doing stand-up comedy.
Like starting to tour, or just maybe starting off locally a little bit and then things got bigger? Was there like a big break that happened to you?
All very local. And this was 2003, 2004. I did it for 6 months to a year, and then I quit because it was hard. Comedy's hard. Writing jokes is hard. And then I started. I messed around with it again in around 2008. I started, and so for 3 years, I was just doing comedy locally, messing around. And then in 2011, I won the Charleston stand-up comedy competition.
Okay.
I won $1,000. And I said, okay, all right, I can make a little money here. And then in 2012, I won that same competition again. And then I got banned from the competition. Since I won 2 years in a row, I was no longer allowed to do it. And I started looking at opportunities outside of Charleston. And that was 2012. And by 2014, I had moved to Nashville. And by the end, because Nashville is a great central location in the country for driving to places. So by late 2014, I was a full-time comedian, not making very much money, but I was a full-time comedian, and I have not worked a regular job since that time.
Wow.
So almost 10 years, not quite yet in the year, but almost 10 years I've been a full-time comic.
Tell me about your regular job. How about your first job? Can you remember that far back?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did one day at a hunting club where I was in charge of the machine that pulled that people would go, pull, and then the skeet flies out of the machine.
Right.
I did that one. I was a very weak kid, so that job was hard for me. And then I worked at a Hickory Hams. It's like a honey bake ham.
Oh, yeah.
Name. I worked for Papa John's. I worked for a restaurant called Jim Bob's. I worked at Western Sizzlin' 2 times. I worked at Office Depot a couple of times. I sold pesticides. I worked at a seafood restaurant called Hyman's. I've had a million jobs.
Wow.
And I had, a couple of jobs a couple of times. I did Office Depot twice, Western Sizzlin' twice, Hyman's twice. I sold pesticides 2 different stints. So I always love a 2-week notice. I always put in a 2-week notice.
Right.
And that's how you get the job back. People love to go out in a blaze of glory. And I'm like, the 2-week notice is the greatest 2 weeks of any job I've ever had, Get the job just to put the 2-week notice in.
Tell me a little bit about, you quit drinking a few years ago, and that had to be tough when you were on the road with Burt Kriescher, who's a party machine.
Well, by the time I was on the road with Burt Kriescher, I had already quit drinking for about 6 years.
Okay.
So it was well behind me, but I will say it was hard to be on the tour bus with him and just because he wants to hang. He wants to hang and party. And, I don't think I'm necessarily Burt's cup of tea because, I just want to, I want to sit around and smoke cigars and have coffee. And I don't, I'm not a partier. I want to go to bed at night and get up in the morning and start our day,
Right.
So, we had a good time. He was very nice to me, and the shows were great. I did great on the shows. But, yeah, I mean, it is a tough mix. Me and Burt is a tough mix. He did take me to my very first sauna.
He took you to your very first sauna?
Yeah, in Ottawa, Canada. We went to a sauna up there, and it was great.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of fancy, I'd say. A guy growing up in Opelika didn't actually expect to go to a sauna with Burt Kriescher. That's pretty cool.
That's when I knew life had turned around.
When did you really feel like life turned around? Was there a particular moment? Maybe this Netflix special is your moment, but a thing that just kind of broke you wide open. Was it a lucky break or some kind of event that happened to you that really changed it all for you?
I don't know that I feel like I had any lucky break, but I feel like when I did Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in Montreal, and I had the set of the night in front of basically all the industry in the country and maybe the world, I felt like that was the moment where I was like, this is all the important people in the entertainment industry, and I just rocked it. And I felt like that was really the moment that changed it all for me.
And you're friends with Nate Bargatze, and you're on his podcast, correct?
I am, yeah. I do the Nate Land podcast. I was asked to join that when they were about 100 episodes in. And, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Nate's a great guy, and I love doing the podcast.
Man, I'm so happy for you. I know I don't know you or anything. And let me just say this. Your parents, they just didn't have parents that wanted them to go to school. So they learned from their parents. It was nothing personal. I'm sure they're proud of you now, aren't they?
Did they call you and tell you to say that?
I just know that parents learn from their parents. So
it's true. You got to break the cycle at some point.
That's right.
It's true.
And you're now doing that. And I wish you all the success, man, with the new Netflix special, Working Man. You can check out Dusty Slay on social media.
All at Dusty Slay.
All at Dusty Slay. Man, pleasure talking to you. Wish you the best of luck. And thanks for giving me a call today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
So there's no doubt in my mind that Dusty's big break was that Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. It's in Montreal. It is huge in the world of comedy. And if he had a great set, he's in front of all the right people, booking comedians or trying to put together a TV show. I mean, he was at the right place, and he was prepared. So without a doubt, I definitely think that was his big break. And I felt the need to tell Dusty that his parents still cared about him, because there were a few times during the conversation that you'll notice that he mentioned his parents kind of, not paying $250 for him to go to community college, or his parents not getting him ready with the SATs and the ACTs. And he would always go back and say, like, I'm not trying to bag on my parents, but so I kind of sensed a little resentment there, but he felt guilty about it as well. I'm sure Dusty's parents are very proud of what he has become. And first job, geez, this guy did everything. His first job, though, was at one of those shooting ranges where he would load the clay pigeons where they go, pull. But he said he was a scrawny kid at the time, and that job only lasted one day. He mentioned a bunch of other odd jobs, some restaurant work. He said Office Max, and also mentioned the art of the 2 weeks notice. He would take a job just for the 2 weeks notice, because those 2 weeks, they're a breeze. Well, good thing Dusty doesn't have to think about that these days, especially with his new special now on Netflix called Working Man. Dusty Slay, pretty funny guy. So please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Past episodes on celebrityjobber.com. So please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Would really appreciate a 5-star rating, leave a review. All our past episodes are available at celebrityjobber.com. And check out our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram. Got a lot of great guests coming up here in the near future. And again, thank you so much for listening. See you next week with another episode of Celebrity Jobber. I'm Jeff Zito.